I'm looking down at the beach. I see people pass to and fro on the promenade, arm in arm, stopping to look at the sea. It's one of the great joys watching the intricate ballet of the world and wondering just who might have choreographed such a thing. Sometimes I wonder what they're thinking, what dark secrets they may be hiding. Are they happy and carefree as they seem? Or might there be something gnawing away inside? Are they thinking anything? Just enjoying being part of the dance? Let's go in and have a think about such thoughts over a nice cool glass of something. Hello, I'm Peter John Cooper. Today's story is about someone who might have lived in the flats opposite and for whom just watching the passers-by in the road was not enough. It's called the butterfly effect. It's up to you whether you think it is true or not. There are two images that stay with me from that summer day. A man in a shabby grey suit, arms outstretched as if grasping for something, the jacket flapping in the breeze as he hurtles through the air and down the cliff face. The other is from a second before, the look of sheer horror on his face before he launched himself over the handrail. And despite the fact that I was cleared of all blame by the coroner, there is still something of a nagging doubt that crowds upon me in those long, sleepless hours before night gives way to dawn. As to the other bodies, well, I have no memories of them. I never actually saw them. They were gathered up in their ones and twos over the following days and weeks, and nobody ever associated them with me or the man in the grey suit. Durley Gardens is a pretty normal sort of place in sleepy old Bournemouth. The road is lined with what were once Edwardian temperance hotels and are now one-room studios and small apartments. In the summer you can hear the pounding beat of parties on the green or the shouts of people playing football in the winter. On the whole, though, given its proximity to the town centre and the busy hotels, it is quiet, untroubled, and regular, the last vestiges of the sleepy old hydro town where old men came to die after running the empire and forgot what they came here for. It is all, as I said, regular, predictable. People come and go on their way to offices, returning home, dashing to the local off-licence, or just passing by. The sort of place where you get to know people and their habits by sight, without ever getting to know their names. For American listeners, this might seem odd, but for us Brits, establishing name intimacy requires a delicacy of timing that often leads us none the wiser as to what someone is called, even if we've nodded to each other and said good morning every day for 10 years. And by then, it's too late. So I never knew his name. I just referred to him as Grey Suit or Sir, as he had undoubtedly something of the hangdog style of a lifetime in educational institutions. You could almost see the clouds of chalk dust blowing off him as he moved, in the sort of roundabout way we find these things out. I knew he had been a maths teacher all his life, travelled in Europe, loved his subject, found sixth formers a chore because any sort of spark of inquiry or individuality had been crushed out of them as soon as they got on the exam treadmill. Anyway, as I said, a maths teacher. Retired a couple of years ago, never mentioned a wife or significant other. The one thing he was happy to talk about in those rare occasions we did speak about anything was mathematics. Apparently, hobby maths is a thing. Bizarre as it seems, there are people all over the world who like maths and do whatever maths requires in times when the rest of us would be watching Netflix or chasing Pokemon among the trees. There are hobby mathematicians all over the world taking on some of the great mathematical conundrums as entertainment. All those people beavering away in the odd hours between tea time and bedtime, trying to calculate the answer to life, the universe, and everything. So, one sunny afternoon when the little waves were lapping at the beach and the sound of children's laughter filtered up from the sands, he hurried over to me where I was sitting on a bench enjoying the sunshine. He was clearly agitated. I've got something I want you to see. Yes? I don't know who else might understand. Would you come up to my flat for a cup of coffee? Because I couldn't think of a polite reason not to, I accepted. I think this was where it all went wrong. He mistook my politeness for having some interest or knowledge of the subject. At the time, I just hoped it wasn't going to prove to be too embarrassing. His room was pretty much what you would have expected for a retired maths teacher who had maths as a hobby and who didn't have a significant other. In other words, Spartan, verging on empty, a couple of bentwood chairs, a small desk and a pile of washing up in the sink, and a large whiteboard attached to one wall covered with the sort of mathematical mumbo-jumbo you would expect to see in the classroom of an episode of The Simpsons. The whole problem with most approaches to Lorentz is that they are looking at the problem the wrong way round, he blurted out without preamble. I nodded as though it all meant something to me. I fumbled through the distant recesses of my brain. Lorentz, isn't he the butterfly effect man? A butterfly flaps its wings, yes, in Brazil, and causes a hurricane in Texas. The title of his address to a symposium in 1972. It was, of course, all whimsy, just to get people's attention. Oh, but think about it for a moment. Given the number of butterflies that there are in the Amazon rainforest, Texas would have been ripped up and wiped off the face of the earth long ago. No, not every butterfly flap produces a hurricane. The mathematics shows up that most inputs develop into all sorts of little whirlpools and eddies that go nowhere, but which do produce much smaller local effects. With the correct algorithms and input data, it is possible to calculate quite exactly some fairly straightforward outcomes. It's a sort of simple program you could run on a small home laptop or a PlayStation. and he pointed to what was undoubtedly a PlayStation console. "I call it," and here he was overcome with his own whimsy, "I call it my butterfly." He dragged me over to the window. "Look," he said, almost gurgling with excitement. I looked. Nothing out of the ordinary, at least. I gazed up and down the road, all as normal. A figure appeared around the corner, another one of those locals that I might nod to if we pass on the pavement. He always wore a check shirt, and I always thought of him as Brian. Although what his real name was, I have no idea. Brian walked along the pavement on the other side of the road, as he usually did. "Now look!" Brian stopped. "Look again!" Brian continued up the road. I turned to see the maths teacher manipulating the joystick on his console. "Keep watching!" Brian stopped again, crossed the road, stopped, turned back, and began walking back down the road. All the time, Sir, in the grey suit, was operating the PlayStation. "I don't understand what I'm meant to be watching," I said. "Well, let's have him cross the road again." He fiddled with the joystick, and Brian crossed. "Are you trying to say—" "No, I'm saying nothing. Just keep watching." Brian hopped around the dustbins a couple of times, then returned from whence he had come. "Well, what do you think? Is there enough evidence to convince the sceptics?" "Well, I think Brian has lost his keys. He looked for them in the gutter and has gone home to see if he left them in his other trousers." Yes, that's exactly how he will explain it to himself." "No, then?" "No, the point is, I was able to predict exactly the mathematics that made him do that, and by extension, my butterfly may not cause a tornado in Texas, but it could be tuned to smaller and more localized outcomes." "Such as controlling Brian's movements?" He gritted his teeth. I smiled. I felt, overstepped a mark. "You're right. Too early to let the numbskulls know about it. You do understand, though," he said, almost pleading, as I went down the stairs. "Yes, I understand. And I thought I did." For the next few weeks, I saw nothing of him. If I thought about Sir at all, I imagined him scribbling incomprehensible rubbish on his whiteboard, or fiddling with his PlayStation console. I had met people like him before. The peddlers of perpetual motion machines, cures for boredness, all completely sincere, absolutely convinced in their own minds, and utterly bonkers. But the little run-in I'd had with him made me spend more time observing the passers-by in the streets. I saw them come and go, but I also saw them stop, turn on the spot, zigzag backwards and forwards. I saw them take strange, uncomfortable poses and stay frozen like that for minutes on end. And the more I looked, the more uncomfortable I felt. When I did see him a couple of months later, I perceived a rising excitement in the way he moved. A number of times he'd almost come over to me, but then had dithered and changed his mind. And then there was the last day I saw him on the green. He was a changed man. The suit now hung on him. His beard was ragged and unkempt, his eyes staring. He was clinging on to the PlayStation, the butterfly, cradling it, holding it tightly to him. But this time he made a beeline for me. How's the butterfly? Yes, I think I have all the evidence I need. I have several individuals for whom I have an almost complete algorithm. There are about 20 of them, completely 5 sigma. He faltered. So, are you going to let the rest of the world's mathematicians know? I have a slight anomaly, something I still need before. I can't. It doesn't. I don't think I can turn it off. I didn't get what he was trying to say. Look, if it makes you feel any better, I think it's a brilliant trick, very convincing. How long did it take you to work out that little routine together? It could make an excellent stage show. People would love it. He stood there aghast. Didn't you hear what I said? I thought you understood. I can't stop it. The algorithm is running. All those people. And then, I'm afraid I laughed at him. I know, but it was just the whole ridiculousness of the whole thing bursting upon me. This is absurd. The man was deluded, seriously deluded. He had a serious God complex, and I regret to say it was the wrong reaction. He was in a wild state, completely out of control, shaking, and I swear with little pockets of foam in the corners of his mouth. I thought you understood. I need you to help, he hissed. I think you need to see a doctor, I said as evenly as I could. I need to see a mathematician. And something seemed to snap. He picked up the PlayStation and came at me with it. His face was a rictus of anger, disappointment, hate. His fingers stretched towards the joystick, and in that instant, I knew what he was intending to do. We wrestled with the PlayStation for a brief moment, but my instinct for self-preservation was suddenly stronger than his emotion. I held it aloft and threw it away over the cliff. At that instant, his face became suffused with a look of horror that seemed to transform his features into something utterly inhuman, and he launched himself using some superhuman reserve of strength to fling himself over the cliff-top rail, grasping vainly for the device, his jacket flapping in the breeze as he fell. I told the police it was self-defence, but quite what I had been defending myself from I couldn't say. He had threatened me with the butterfly. The sad story made headlines in the Echo for a day or two, but was soon lost in the welter of holiday news of traffic jams and the air show, and nobody ever connected it to the little outbreak of strange deaths that was discovered over the next days and weeks. Odd individuals, all from our locality, had been found among the trees and bushes, frozen to the spot, unmoving, unmovable. Nothing organic, the hospital said. A sudden, unexplained outbreak of catatonia. Coincidence, mass hysteria, frozen to the spot until they had all just starved to death. "It was," said a brief story that appeared in the Echo, as though they had all just suddenly been switched off. Thank you for listening to that story. Do you ever stop to watch the to and fro of people passing by? Have you ever thought that there might be somebody with a remote control hiding somewhere in charge of all that? Well, have you ever wanted to be that person in charge? It's a big responsibility, you know. Please let me know on the Facebook page Tales from the Cliff Edge, or comment on peterjohncooper.podbean.com. See you next week.